The explosion lifted Staff Sergeant Sarah Reynolds off her feet and slammed her against the mud brick wall of the Afghan compound. For a moment, the world went silent except for a high-pitched ringing in her ears. Through the dust and smoke, she saw Captain William Iron Bill Harrison struggling to stand, blood streaming from a wound in his thigh, his M4 carbine still clutched in his hands as he fired controlled 3-round bursts at the Taliban fighters pouring through the breached wall. "Medic!" someone screamed, and Reynolds realized with a jolt that she was the medic they were calling for. She pushed herself up, her medical pack somehow still attached to her back, and saw the full scope of the disaster. Half of her squad was down. The Taliban had caught them in a perfect ambush in this remote valley in Helmand province, and now they were closing in for the kill. Captain Harrison was trying to coordinate a defense, but the blood pooling around his right leg told her he had minutes, maybe less, before he'd bleed out. What happened in the next 47 minutes would become one of the most decorated actions in modern military history, earning Sarah Reynolds the Medal of Honor and forever changing how the military viewed combat medics. But in that moment, covered in dust and blood, all she knew was that her commander was dying, her squad was pinned down, and she was the only one who could save them. "Intel says 2, maybe 3 tangos guarding the cache," Major James Old Eagle Mackenzie said, his weathered fingers tracing the contours of the valley on the tactical map. At 62, Mackenzie was a living legend, a Vietnam veteran with a Silver Star, 40 years of service, and combat experience stretching from the jungles of Southeast Asia to the deserts of Operation Desert Storm. His once black hair was now silver, but his eyes remained sharp as flint. "With all due respect, sir," Reynolds said, studying the map, "that valley looks like a perfect place for an ambush." Mackenzie's lined face broke into a knowing smile. "Trust your gut, Reynolds. I've seen perfect intelligence get good men killed." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small brass object, a bullet on a chain. "Took this off a VC sniper at Hamburger Hill in '69. Stopped him from putting a hole in me. Been my lucky charm ever since." He pressed it into Reynolds' palm. "Take it. Got a feeling you might need it today." Staff Sergeant Sarah Reynolds was 28, with 3 tours in Iraq, and now on her 2nd in Afghanistan. Her father had been a Marine in the Gulf War, instilling in her a profound respect for military service from childhood. She'd become a combat medic to save lives, but Mackenzie had seen something more in her. For the past 6 months, he'd been secretly training her in advanced marksmanship and tactical command, skills rarely taught to medics. "A good medic saves lives with bandages," Mackenzie often told her during their dawn training sessions. "A great one knows when to pick up a rifle instead." Captain Harrison assembled his 12-person squad in the pre-mission briefing. Marcus Joker Rodriguez, 25, would take point. The 3rd-generation Hispanic-American soldier had an uncanny ability to spot IEDs. Jenny Hawkeye Mitchell, 30, was their sniper. She'd broken the unit's long-distance kill record last month. Sam Chen, 26, son of Taiwanese immigrants and a technology prodigy, managed communications. And Danny Thompson, 19, on his first deployment, nervously fingered the photo of his wife and newborn daughter he kept in his wallet. "This mission is time-sensitive," Harrison explained, his Texas drawl more pronounced when he was focused. "That weapons cache is supplying the IEDs that have killed 3 platoons in the last month. We get in, confirm contents, call in demolition, and get out before sunrise." As the squad prepared their gear, Mackenzie pulled Reynolds aside. "Ever hear about a combat medic named Catherine Lucas?" he asked. Reynolds shook her head. "Vietnam, 68. Our unit got hit hard near the DMZ. Commander down, half the men wounded. This 5'0" nurse picked up the CO's 45, organized a defense, and held off the VC for 3 hours until extraction arrived." He paused, his eyes distant with memory. She didn't just patch wounds. She fought like hell to make sure we all came home. Reynolds checked her medical supplies one final time. Bandages, tourniquets, morphine, quick clot, chest seals, everything she'd need to keep someone alive long enough to reach a field hospital. She'd performed this ritual hundreds of times, but it never got easier, knowing that in minutes she might be using these supplies on people she'd eaten breakfast with that morning. "You're different from other medics I've seen," Harrison said, appearing beside her. "Most never look beyond the bandage. You see the whole battlefield." The 43-year-old captain had 6 months left before retirement, eager to return to his wife and 2 teenagers in Dallas. "Just trying to keep you all breathing, sir," Reynolds replied, securing her M9 sidearm. "Well, keep yourself breathing too. That's an order." They moved out at 0400 using night vision to navigate the treacherous terrain. Reynolds observed Thompson's nervous movements, remembering her own first mission. Rodriguez walked point, his movements fluid and confident as he scanned for tripwires and pressure plates. "Eagle Eye, this is Hammer 1, Harrison radioed to the Overwatch team with thermal imaging. "What do you see?" "Negative movement, Hammer 1. Thermal shows maybe 2 or 3 signatures inside the main building." As they approached the compound, Reynolds felt a growing unease. Too many fresh tire tracks. No civilians in the surrounding area. Poppy fields surrounding the compound, a telltale sign of Taliban drug operations funding their weapons purchases. "Something's not right," she whispered to Mitchell. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" Mitchell replied. 2 or 3 tangos don't need this much security." Harrison sensed their concern. "I don't like it either, but this cache supplies the bombs that are killing our boys. We hit it fast and hard." Rodriguez placed the breaching charge on the gate while the others took covering positions. Reynolds positioned herself fourth in line, close enough to reach casualties quickly, far enough back to avoid the immediate kill zone. Breaching in 3, 2, 1. The explosion shattered the pre-dawn quiet. Rodriguez was first through, followed by Harrison and the others. Reynolds entered fourth, her M9 pistol in one hand, medical pack ready in the other. The compound erupted. Muzzle flashes lit up from every window, doorway, and fighting position. It wasn't 3 fighters. It was 30, maybe more. The Taliban had turned the compound into a kill box, and Charlie Company had walked right into it. "It's a trap!" Mackenzie's voice crackled over the radio. "Intelligence was compromised. Get out now!" Thompson took a round to the neck and went down spraying blood. "Man down!" someone yelled, and Reynolds was moving before the words finished echoing. She slid to Thompson's side, her hands already pulling out combat gauze. The wound was bad. The bullet had nicked the carotid artery. She applied direct pressure while fishing for a hemostatic agent with her other hand. "You're okay, Danny," she lied, her voice calm despite the chaos. "Just a scratch." "I've got you." Around her, the firefight intensified. The distinctive crack of AK-47s mixed with the sharper sound of American M4s. RPGs screamed overhead, exploding against the compound walls. Through it all, she heard Harrison's voice, steady and commanding. "Lewis, suppress that window. Rodriguez, get a grenade in that doorway. We need to move to cover." Reynolds managed to stabilize Thompson, but he'd lost too much blood. With Mitchell's help, she dragged him toward the main building where the squad was establishing a hasty defense. The room was chaos. Sergeant Kowalski was bleeding from shrapnel wounds to his arm and face. Private White had taken a round through the calf and was attempting to apply a tourniquet with shaking hands. Chen was screaming into his handset, calling for immediate close air support and medical evacuation. "Negative on the birds," came the response. "Weather's moving in. Nothing can fly for at least 2 hours." 2 hours. In this fight, that was a lifetime. Reynolds moved from soldier to soldier, assessing wounds, applying tourniquets, administering morphine. Her hands worked automatically, muscle memory from countless hours of training taking over. She didn't think about the bullets cracking overhead or the RPGs exploding nearby. Her world narrowed to the wounded in front of her. Harrison continued to coordinate the defense, moving from window to window, directing fire, calling out enemy positions. His presence was everywhere, holding the squad together through sheer force of will. Then the IED went off. The Taliban had planted it in the floor of the building probably weeks ago, waiting for exactly this moment. The explosion tore through the room, throwing bodies like rag dolls. The roof partially collapsed, raining debris and dust. Reynolds found herself on the floor, ears ringing, vision blurred. She pushed herself up, coughing in the thick dust, and immediately looked for casualties. What she saw made her blood run cold. Captain Harrison was down, his right leg twisted at an unnatural angle, blood pumping from a massive wound in his thigh. His femoral artery had been hit. He had minutes before he bled out. Reynolds crawled to him, her medical pack miraculously still on her back. Harrison's eyes were open but unfocused, his face already pale from blood loss. His M4 was still in his hands, and even semi-conscious. He was trying to aim it at the doorway where Taliban fighters were attempting to rush in. "Sir, I need you to stay still," Reynolds said, ripping open her last tourniquet. She applied it high on his thigh, cranking it tight until the bleeding slowed. But she could see other wounds, shrapnel to the abdomen, possible punctured lung. He needed a surgeon, not a field medic. Around her, the situation was deteriorating. Half the squad was wounded. They were almost out of ammunition. The Taliban fighters were pressing closer, sensing victory. "Mitchell, Kowalski, can you still fight?" she yelled. "Barely," Mitchell replied, blood streaming down her face from a scalp wound. "Hold the north wall. Chen, keep calling for support." She turned back to Harrison, who was trying to focus on her face. "Reynolds, get them out," he whispered. "Not without you." "Sir?" She grabbed him under the arms and started dragging him toward the back of the building where there was marginally better cover. Harrison weighed at least 200 pounds with his gear, but adrenaline gave her strength she didn't know she possessed. Bullets cracked past her head so close she could feel the heat. An RPG exploded against the wall, showering them with debris. Harrison, even in his semi-conscious state, kept his M4 raised, firing short bursts at any Taliban fighter who showed himself. They made it to a small storage room in the back of the building. Reynolds propped Harrison against the wall and did a rapid assessment. The tourniquet was holding, but he'd already lost too much blood. His breathing was labored, definitely a punctured lung. Without immediate surgery, he wouldn't make it. "Reynolds!" Harrison's voice was barely a whisper. Take my rifle. The squad needs..." "Sir, you're going to be fine. The medevac..." "No birds coming," he coughed, blood speckling his lips. "You know what needs to be done." From the main room, she heard Chen's desperate voice. "They're coming through the east wall. We can't hold." Reynolds looked at Harrison's M4, then at his face. His eyes, though glazed with pain, were clear. He knew what he was asking. The squad needed every fighter, and right now, keeping him alive meant she couldn't help defend their position. "Sir, I'm a medic. I save lives. I don't..." "You're a soldier first," Harrison interrupted, his voice gaining strength through sheer will. "And right now, those soldiers need a leader. Be that leader, Reynolds." "That's an order." Reynolds touched Mackenzie's bullet necklace, feeling its weight against her collarbone. She made her choice. She grabbed Harrison's M4, checking the magazine, half full. She pulled his remaining magazines from his vest, stuffing them into her own pouches. "I'll be back for you, sir," she promised. "I know you will," Harrison replied, managing a weak smile. Reynolds burst from the storage room to find the main room in chaos. Rodriguez was down, unconscious or dead. Mitchell was firing from a window, her ammunition nearly gone. Chen was still on the radio, his voice hoarse from screaming. Only 5 soldiers were still combat effective, and they were being overwhelmed. "Mitchell, what's your ammo count?" Reynolds yelled, taking position at a window. "Last mag." Through the window, Reynolds could see Taliban fighters massing for a final assault, at least 20 of them moving through the rubble and smoke. In minutes, they'd overrun the building. That's when her medical training kicked in, but in an unexpected way. In medicine, you learn to see patterns, to diagnose problems quickly and act decisively. Looking at the Taliban positions, she saw the pattern of their attack. They were bunching up at 2 breach points, creating choke points. Fatal funnels, Harrison would have called them. "Chen, you still got those grenades?" she called. "2 frags, 1 smoke." "Mitchell, Lewis, concentrate fire on the left breach. Everyone else, watch the right." She raised Harrison's M4, the ACOG scope settling on a Taliban fighter carrying an RPG. She controlled her breathing just like Mackenzie had taught her. Exhale halfway, hold. Squeeze the trigger. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. The fighter dropped. It was different from medicine. In medicine, she fought to save lives. Here, she had to take them to save others. But the goal was the same. Protect her patients, her squad. "Mackenzie, I've taken command," she radioed. "Harrison's down. We need options." Mackenzie's voice came back immediately. "Remember what I taught you, kid? Find their weak point." Reynolds kept firing, her rounds disciplined and accurate. Every shot mattered. They were too low on ammunition to spray and pray. "Frag out!" Chen yelled, lobbing a grenade through the left breach. The explosion sent bodies flying. The Taliban assault wavered. They'd expected to overrun a demoralized, wounded squad. Instead, they were facing organized resistance. Bodies piled up at the breach points. But Reynolds knew they couldn't hold forever. They were down to their last magazines, and the Taliban had unlimited reinforcements. They needed a game changer. That's when she remembered the intel about the weapons cache. "Chen, the cache. Where exactly is it?" "Building across the courtyard, northeast corner." Reynolds looked through the window. The building was maybe 50 meters away, but those 50 meters were open ground covered by Taliban fire. It would be suicide to try to reach it, unless… "Chen, pop smoke between us and that building. Mitchell, Lewis, Kowalski, covering fire on my signal." "Reynolds, what are you…" Mitchell began. "We need those weapons, or we die here. On my mark. Mark!" Chen threw the smoke grenade. Purple smoke billowed across the courtyard. Mitchell and the others opened fire, forcing the Taliban to take cover. Reynolds sprinted from the building. Time seemed to slow. She could hear bullets cracking past, feel them tugging at her equipment. The smoke provided some concealment, but not cover. A round sparked off the ground inches from her feet. Another punched through her medical pack. She covered the 50 meters in what felt like hours, but was probably seconds. She hit the door of the target building at full speed, crashing through. Inside, she found exactly what they'd hoped for. Crates of weapons and ammunition, including several RPG-7s and boxes of AK-47s. But more importantly, she found blocks of C4 with detonators. The Taliban had been planning something big. Working quickly, she grabbed an RPG and several rockets, slinging them across her back. She stuffed her pockets with M4 magazines from a crate of captured American supplies. Then she had an idea that would have made any combat engineer proud. She rigged 2 blocks of C4 with a simple timer, the kind of improvised explosive she'd seen too many times in Iraq, now turned against the enemy. She set it for 3 minutes. As she gathered as much ammunition as she could carry, Reynolds noticed something on a dead Taliban fighter, a detailed map of the main American base. This wasn't just a weapons cache, it was a command center for a major planned attack. She grabbed the map and sprinted back toward her building, The smoke was dissipating. A Taliban fighter emerged from cover, AK raised. Reynolds fired Harrison's M4 from the hip, dropping him. Another appeared. 3-round burst. Down. She crashed back through the door of their building, ammunition spilling from her arms. "Grab everything," she yelled, dumping the supplies. "We're displacing in 2 minutes. There's a depression in the ground 20 meters north. Better cover than here. Move the wounded first." She ran to the storage room where she'd left Harrison. He was still conscious, barely. His face was ghost white, but his eyes tracked to her as she entered. "Heard shooting," he whispered. "Had to borrow your rifle, sir. Hope you don't mind." She grabbed him under the arms again, beginning the exhausting drag toward their new position. The other soldiers were moving too, carrying or dragging the wounded. They had just cleared the building when the C4 detonated. The explosion was massive. The weapons cache had contained more explosives than she'd realized. The entire building vanished in a ball of fire that rose 100 feet into the air. The shockwave knocked everyone flat, but it also stunned the Taliban fighters who'd been preparing for another assault. "Move! Move!" Reynolds yelled, half carrying, half dragging Harrison to the depression. It wasn't much, just a natural fold in the ground about 3 feet deep. But it was better than the compromised building. They slid in immediately, setting up defensive positions. Reynolds propped Harrison against the earthen wall, checking his wounds. The tourniquet was holding, but his breathing was getting worse. "That was impressive," Harrison managed. "Save your strength, sir." The Taliban fighters were recovering from the explosion, but they were more cautious now. The massive blast had shown that the Americans still had fight in them. "Reynolds," Mackenzie's voice came over the radio. "The map you found confirms it. They were planning a major assault on our main FOB. You just disrupted their command center." Chen established communication with a Predator drone overhead, providing eyes on enemy positions. "Charlie Company, this is Eagle Eye. We count approximately 40 enemy fighters converging on your position. Recommend immediate extraction." "Negative on extraction," Reynolds replied. "We have non-ambulatory wounded. Request immediate close air support. Nearest fast movers are 30 minutes out. Can you hold?" 30 minutes with 40 Taliban fighters closing in and ammunition running low. "We'll hold," Reynolds said with more confidence than she felt. She turned to the squad, what was left of it. 5 soldiers still capable of fighting, 6 wounded, including Harrison. The math was impossible, but then she remembered something Harrison had said during a training exercise months ago. When the math doesn't work, change the equation. "Chen, that Predator, is it armed?" "Negative. Surveillance only." "What about artillery? Any fire bases in range?" "Fire-based lightning is about 15 clicks out, but we're danger close for artillery." "Get them on the line." While Chen worked the radio, Reynolds studied their position through Harrison's rifle scope. The Taliban were massing in 3 groups, preparing for a coordinated assault from multiple directions. But they were making a mistake. They were bunching up, using the same covered approaches to avoid the Americans' line of sight. "Fire-based lightning online," Chen reported. "Lightning, this is Charlie Company," Reynolds said, taking the handset. "Request immediate fire mission. Danger close. I have the coordinates." "Charlie Company, that's inside danger close range. I'm the senior combat effective soldier and I'm calling it in. Grid reference follows." She rattled off the coordinates, using the drone's feed to precisely target the Taliban positions. "Charlie Company, confirm you have adequate cover." Reynolds looked at their shallow depression, then at her wounded soldiers. It wasn't adequate, not really, but it was all they had. "Confirmed. Fire for effect. Rounds out. 40 seconds to impact. Take cover." "Everyone down. Danger close," Reynolds yelled, pushing herself on top of Harrison to shield him with her body. The world exploded. The 159mm howitzer rounds, impacted like the fist of God. The ground shook. Dirt and debris rained down. The concussion was overwhelming even at their distance. Reynolds felt like her chest was being compressed, her lungs unable to draw breath. But the effect on the Taliban positions was devastating. Through the dust and smoke, she could see bodies thrown through the air, fighting positions obliterated. "Adjust fire," she called, using the drone feed to walk the artillery onto the surviving enemy positions. "Drop 50, left 10. More rounds impacted. The Taliban assault disintegrated. The survivors began to flee, their morale shattered by the devastating fire. "Cease fire! Cease fire!" Reynolds called. "Enemy retreating." In the sudden silence that followed, she could hear the distant thrum of helicopter rotors. "Charlie Company, this is Dustoff 31, came a new voice on the radio. "We're 5 minutes out. Pop smoke for visual." Reynolds couldn't believe it. "How are they flying in this weather?" Mackenzie's voice crackled through. "I pulled a few strings. When you serve 40 years, you know a few people." Reynolds popped a green smoke grenade, then turned her attention back to the wounded. Harrison was still breathing, but barely. Thompson had slipped into shock. Rodriguez was conscious now, but confused. Probably a concussion. The next few minutes were a blur. The Blackhawks came in hot, door gunners laying down suppressive fire, even though the Taliban had retreated. The flight medics jumped out, joining Reynolds and rapidly triaging and loading the wounded. "Who's in command here?" one of the flight medics asked. "That would be Sergeant Reynolds," Chen said, pointing to Reynolds. The flight medic looked at Reynolds, covered in blood, dirt, and dust. Harrison's M4 still slung across her chest, medical pack torn and bullet-riddled. "You're the medic who called in the artillery?" "Someone had to," Reynolds replied, helping to load Harrison onto a stretcher. His eyes found hers as they lifted him. "Reynolds," he whispered. She leaned close. "Thank you," he said simply. "Just doing my job, sir." "No," he managed a weak smile. "You did everyone's job." As the helicopters lifted off with the wounded, Reynolds finally allowed herself to feel the exhaustion. She'd been running on adrenaline for over an hour. Now, with the immediate threat gone and her patients evacuated, she felt like she could barely stand. Mitchell appeared at her side, offering a canteen. I don't even have words for what that was. Reynolds took a long drink, then looked at the devastation around them. The compound was in ruins. Bodies, mostly Taliban, littered the ground. Smoke rose from numerous fires. It looked like something out of an apocalypse movie. "I'm a medic," Reynolds said quietly. "I'm supposed to save lives." "You did save lives," Mitchell replied. "All of ours." Reynolds stood in the east room of the White House, her dress uniform immaculate, her new Master Sergeant stripes still feeling strange on her shoulders. Captain Harrison was there too, walking with a cane but walking. Thompson had survived, though he'd been medically discharged. Rodriguez had recovered fully and was back on duty. Mackenzie, now retired, stood tall in his formal uniform, chest heavy with decorations from 3 wars. He approached Reynolds before the ceremony. "I never told you the full story about that combat medic in Vietnam," he said, his voice low. "Her name was Catherine Reynolds. Your mother." Reynolds stared at him in shock. "My mother?" "But she never talked about it. Most of us didn't. But when I saw your name on the combat medic roster, I knew. You have her same determination. That's why I requested to be your advisor, to see if her daughter had the same fire." He touched the bullet necklace she still wore. "Seems like you do." The president read the citation for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of life above and beyond the call of duty. As the Medal of Honor was placed around her neck, Reynolds thought about that moment in the compound when she'd picked up Harrison's rifle. She'd crossed a line that day, from healer to warrior and back again. Some would say she'd compromised her role as a medic, but she knew the truth. She'd done what needed to be done to save lives, whether that meant applying tourniquets or calling in artillery. After the ceremony, Harrison approached her. He walked slowly but steadily, the months of physical therapy paying off. "I never properly thanked you," he said. "You already did, sir, in the helicopter." "No, I mean—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "You didn't just save my life. You saved all our lives. You became the leader we needed when we needed it most." "I just did what you would have done, sir." Harrison smiled. "No, Reynolds. You did what you had to do. That's what makes you exceptional." Command Sergeant Major Reynolds stood before a class of new combat medics at Fort Sam Houston. The program had changed significantly since her days of training. Combat medics now received expanded weapons training, tactical command courses, and emergency leadership instruction. The changes she had inspired. "You are healers first, always," she told them. "But you are also soldiers. There may come a time when you have to choose between treating a wound and preventing more wounds from happening. When that moment comes, remember that your ultimate mission is to preserve life by any means necessary." She showed them the scars on her hands, not from combat, but from the countless IVs she'd started, the pressure bandages she'd applied, the lives she'd fought to save. And then she showed them her marksmanship badge, earned after that day in the valley when she'd learned that sometimes a medic's most important tool isn't a bandage or a tourniquet. It's the courage to do whatever needs to be done. The tradition of combat medics as pure non-combatants had died in that valley in Afghanistan. In its place was born a new understanding that in modern warfare, every soldier might need to be a leader. Every medic might need to be a warrior. After class, Reynolds visited Mackenzie's grave at Arlington. She placed the bullet necklace on his headstone before taking it back and putting it around her neck once more. "Thank you for teaching me to be a medic. And a soldier, Colonel," she said quietly. "I'm passing that lesson on." The sacred duty to bring everyone home remained constant. And on that day in Helmand Province, Staff Sergeant Sarah Reynolds had fulfilled that duty in ways no one could have imagined. She dragged her commander through hell, picked up his weapon, and finished the mission. In doing so, she'd not only saved lives, but redefined what it meant to be a combat medic in the 21st century.